That's fine.
Paul, let me tell you, I'm not a war hero. I'm a peacetime sailor.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, that's what intrigued me about it, because I talked to a lot of people that, that served in wartime, whether it's World War II or Vietnam or Korea or wherever. Let me tell you about the show. I don't know whether you've seen it or not. We've been going for about a year now.
Don't get it on my TV.
Well, that's what I figured. It's on KAMU.
Yeah.
And it's a weekly show, and we've been on the air about a year. We started in May, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's called Veterans of the Valley, and I spotlight a different veteran each week. Mostly they've been World War II, because trying to get them on as fast as we can. And it's a 30-minute show, actually 27 and a half minutes, and it's very informal. It's a lot like you and I are right now. I'm sitting in a chair, you're sitting in a chair.
And you can talk to me for 27 and a half minutes?
There's cameras on us, and we just talk about your experiences, your experiences.
You want me to tell you some war stories?
Yeah. Tell me some stories. So you were a Navy guy? Were you on a boat? Were you a flyer? Were you?
Well, let's put it this way. I grew up in a small town in the Texas Panhandle. Had 978 people.
What town?
McLean on Highway 66, ran right through town.
Mm-hmm.
And I left there at age 16 as soon as I could get out, and I went away to the University of Texas.
Right.
And the guy I was working for, a newspaper man, said you ought to join the ROTC because if there's a war, it's better to go in as an officer than an enlisted. So I said, okay. So I joined the ROTC, and sure enough, my senior year when I came back, they said, this is 1951, 52, you either sign up for active duty or else we're going to make you eligible for the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed up for active duty and applied for flight training.
This was out of high school, right?
Yeah. Well, I was in college. I finished college.
Okay.
I was 20 years old.
Where'd you go to college?
University.
Oh, Texas. Okay, you said that.
I hate to say that.
No, that's fine. Great school. Okay.
Later on, I tried to apply for their library school when I was about to get out of the Navy, and they said I was too old.
Yeah.
I was 37, 38, anyway.
Right.
Anyway, I applied for flight training, and in those days you had to spend a year on a ship before you could go to flight training.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Washington, D.C. and got my uniform allowance and my ID card, and on a plane to the Mediterranean, and was on a gasoline tanker for, 6 months. And so sent me back to school in Boston to go to CIC school. The ship was coming back, so I waited for it, and as it came into New York Harbor, it dropped off part of the screw. So we spent New Year's Day in the dry dock waiting for a screw to be put on. Great.
What year would this have been?
This is 1952, 53.
Okay.
And then we picked up a load of fuel in Bayonne, New Jersey. Went around to Corpus Christi, dropped off some gasoline, picked up some jet fuel, and went through the Panama Canal down to Hawaii. Dropped off the jet fuel and came back to Long Beach, and I got off the ship. Went to flight training. I decided I was not a fighter pilot, I was a 4-engine bomber pilot. So I applied for 4-engine airplanes, and lo and behold, they sent me to 2-engine airplanes. They were B-26s towing targets out of Guam in Japan and Okinawa in the Philippines. So I spent 2 years there.
And you were flying the 2-engine?
I was flying a B-26.
B-26?
Towing targets.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got some jets. While I was there, they sent me back to Justice School in Newport. And they decided, since we're getting the jets, they need somebody to fly it. So they sent me to Brownfield to a sister squadron to learn how to fly jets.
Mm-hmm.
In those days, we didn't have 2-engine airplanes, or 2-seat airplanes. We had 1-seater.
Right.
You read the handbook, put you in an airplane where you went.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was taking off with this guy, he aborted. So there I was, airborne, San Diego, 100%. I must have been doing 600 miles an hour, in a big circle about 30 miles in diameter. And I kept waiting for him to show up, and he never did. And the red light came on, he says, well, you ought to land. So I came down and tried to land, and I was coming so fast that when I made my turn, I wound up in Mexico. and I made another pass. Finally got landed, and started smoking again because it was just too much for me. I just had to have a cigarette. Anyway, went back to Japan and towed targets there. Ran out of gas in the jet on the way to a sister unit. Towed targets for Republic of Korea ships and anti-aircraft people. Let's see what else. Got transferred to San Diego, spent 2 years on the staff. Got married. Went to line school. It was graduate school in Monterey. Went to Mayport, 1950, 60, 59.
Mm-hmm.
They decided that I needed some carrier experience, which I tried to get out of. So they sent me to a squadron that flew single engine prop aircraft, SPADs, 84 ADs, Sky Raiders. And they were two groups. There was a ECM group that went out on the big carriers units, and they jammed all the radar stations. And there was the one that I flew, had a big belly on it, and we would fly up, 6,000 or 8,000 feet above the ship, 300 miles away, and we'd send the radar picture back so they could turn off their radar, and they could extend their eyes. And had a lot of experiences on that ship. And then we were on the Wasp, and we were stationed in Quonset, and the Wasp was in Boston. So every time the Wasp went out, we had to go out and land on it. Whereas normally, the ship is alongside the airport, and they just lift the airplanes on.
Right.
But we had to land on them. And then came, I guess it was what was JFK's quarantine blockade, 60s. 60. Anyway, we were going to go out to sea for an ASW exercise, and they decided to send us out about 5 days early. And we went down about 200 miles from the coast of Cuba. And we had 3 squadrons. We had 2 squadrons of S2S, or twin-engine aircraft, and a squadron of helicopters. And then my detachment of 4 Sky Raiders. And we would fly out and find ships heading towards Cuba. And we'd make a low pass. They gave us a special camera. And we took pictures of them. And then we rushed them back, and they developed them. And if they decided it might have some missiles on it, but they send a Russian-speaking JG in a helicopter out there to speak to them on a bullhorn. And if they had missiles, they would talk about it for a while, and after a while the ship would turn around and go back. So we spotted, 4 or 5, half a dozen maybe. Took pictures of them, and they all turned around and came back. But we were out there about 12 days.
So you were on these single engine props?
Yeah, we flew around the clock off the USS Wasp.
Now, were these 2-seaters?
They were actually 4-seaters.
4-seaters?
There was a guy sitting in the right seat looking at the radar, and 2 guys in the back who were tuning it.
Right.
And the guy watching the radar is the guy who took the pictures with the camera.
Okay.
So we fly down close.
And you were
I was a pilot.
You were the pilot. Okay.
Well, see, there wasn't 2 sets of controls. There was 1 set of controls.
Okay.
There's a big cockpit. And we'd fly down alongside the guy and take pictures. Somebody gave him a crash course and had a mash button.
Right.
We'd take pictures and come back and they'd develop them, and then they'd send out a helicopter. But it was pretty exciting because we didn't know what the hell was going on. We didn't have any news. Radios were not allowed on the ship. Cameras were not allowed on the ship. The only news we got was through the regular ship's newsletter, which was sporadic at most, and we didn't know what the hell was going on. And then
So you weren't aware, you were just doing your job. You weren't really aware that...
We knew the missiles were headed to Cuba, and we were supposed to try to stop them, but that's all.
And then but you weren't aware that it had become the big...
Oh, no, we didn't know it was the big
political crisis.
big political thing. And then later on, we were at sea when JFK got killed. And to us, it was just another day. We just kept on flying. I mean, what were we supposed to do?
Right.
So we flew, 25, 30 days. Then we made a cruise we were going to make a cruise. Well, let's start back again. While I was on the Wasp, we made 1 European cruise, and we had 12 European ports in about a 6-month period. Came back and I was transferred to the last of the straight deck carriers. And we were supposed to go on the same cruise with midshipmen. And as we were coming up Chesapeake Bay to pick up the midshipmen, a freighter ran into us and knocked off the elevator that takes you, pilots up to the flight deck. So we spent about 6 weeks in dry dock in Norfolk and didn't get to go on the cruise. So it was terrible because the wives had all bought tickets, and it was a big deal. Let's see, after that I went to graduate school in Boston at Boston University and got a degree in public relations. Then I spent 3 years in the Pentagon dealing with veterans groups.
Yeah.
Then let's see, I went to the same squadron I'd come from, but I went as exec. 3 months after I was there, they decided to dissolve the squadron. We'd bought a house, the kids were in school, they had a horse, whole bit. So they got rid of everything, all the airplanes. We went down and learned how to fly A4s and A3Ds, and we got a big Super Constellation, and what else did we have? A couple of F4s. And we would go out to Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, and we contracted with a civilian to fly a B-47. And there'd be 2 A4s flying alongside the B-47, and when the B-47 picked up a group of ships, they would start jamming it, and as they jammed it, the A4s played like they were missiles heading down towards the ships. Killed them every time. They never did kill them, the A4s. 1, 2, and 3 lines of defense, and they could still get through. So that was a real problem with it. We also jammed some of their carrier landings, so they found out the carriers could not operate without radios. And a pilot would be, or an LSO would be saying, bring it in faster, faster, and we play back some of the recordings we made saying turn right or turn left. And they just sent airplanes all over the place. They were all over the sky. So we found that didn't work, so there's new tactics developed for there. Anyway, I hurt my neck, had to have a vertebra removed. They decided I couldn't be the skipper, so they'd send me to War College. I went to War College, and then they sent me to Naples, Italy for 7 years, and I retired. That's it.
When did you retire?
77, October the 1st, 77.
So
A little over 25 years.
So you were never sent to Vietnam?
Well, the deal in Vietnam, when I was in the Pentagon, I volunteered to go to Vietnam because you had to have your ticket punched. McNamara was the boss in Vietnam, and he says, if you got orders to the Department of Defense, you have to serve out your 3 years. Well, in 3 years, the war was just about over.
Yeah.
But we've had the war on hunger there in Washington. We had the peace marches. We had the Pentagon stormed by activists, the whole bit. So I felt like I was in a war anyway.
Exactly.
But anyway, it was sort of interesting.
So tell me what you did. You said at Pentagon, it was in Veterans Affairs, or
I was in the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs. And we were the liaison between the Defense Department and the veterans organization, like the VFW and the American Legion, the DAV, I don't know, there must have been a dozen of them. And when they had their big annual conventions, we always went to their conventions. We sat in on all their meetings. We answered any questions they had about the Department of Defense. We handed out business cards. They wrote us letters. We then took the letters when we got back and decided whether it was the Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines that was going to answer them. And we'd send them to these to answer them.
So these were mainly World War II vets and World War I vets?
Yeah, World War II.
Yeah.
And there was some Korean, but not very many, because
Right.
the Korean War just about finished up by then.
Right.
But there was not much going on. And then the Vietnam War was on and off again, and there weren't very many veterans that would join the veterans organization in those days.
So now what did you do in Naples for 7 years?
Well, for 3 years I was in charge of naval operations in the Mediterranean. And I kept track of all the ships and where they were going and made sure they got their supplies and all that sort of stuff. In the last 3 years, I was in charge of their special weapons, their nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only tell you that they had plans for what they call ADMs, atomic demolition munitions, in Greece and Turkey, that they were going to blow up certain passes to not allow people to come into the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in charge of inspecting the storage facilities, the code words they used to set them off, the war gaming that went on with nuclear weapons, anything having to do with the nuclear weapons. And it was a real problem dealing with the Turks and the Greeks and the Italians and the Brits, because they all had their own ideas, and we had a new commanding officer came in and said he's going to take care of getting these Greeks and Turks together. That's all there was to it. And we tried to explain to him this has been going on for 5,000 years, and during his 2-year tour, he was not going to make a dent in the puddle. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to take care of." Well, he didn't. He didn't get anything accomplished. He died later of cancer. Anyway, so that's all I was. That was a peacetime veteran.
Well, I mean, that's a fascinating.
I mean, I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed all the flying that I did. I was sure glad to give it up.
So you flew how many different kinds of aircraft?
Let's see. Started out flying. I learned how to fly on the SNJ. Qualified on the carrier on December the 7th, 1953.
You remember your first carrier landing?
First carrier landing, yes. There was a certain deal you had to go through. You had to, 4 of you had to come out and make a pass. You had to be an echelon. You had to make a left turn, come around. You had to make sure the tail hook was down, the wheels were down, the flaps were set, the props were set, and you shot the landing. And this guy out there had an apron. You ever did take off? He said, check your prop and check your throttle and check your mixture.
Yeah.
So he checked that, and you poured the coal to it and took off. And you did that 6 times. And I had the greatest urge to wave at these guys at the captain's place when I passed by, but I didn't, because they would have kicked me out if I had. You know,
Right.
I was supposed to keep a hand on them. Anyway, that was fun. But qualifying in AD was something else, because I don't know, they took us out with a detachment as extra pilots. And they launched us one day, and we thought we were going to get our 6th landing in. And we didn't. They just let us fly around the ship for 4.5 hours. It was ridiculous. We never did get any landings. We were out there 2 weeks and never did get any landings. So they sent us to another carrier, and we got 3 landings. And then they sent us to a carrier down in Pensacola, and we got our 6-day landings. And then it took 6 of us down to Norfolk to get our night landings. Well, 6 of us went out. One guy ran out of gas on the runway, and when the fuel truck came up, he ran into it. So he didn't get airborne. Another guy got airborne, said something was wrong with his instruments. He came out and landed. Another guy never got closer than 500 feet to the ship. He'd come over and they'd say, okay, drop to 300 feet and report the ball. And he'd say, yeah, roger, ball. And he was about 10 miles out and he could see it. And he never got lower than 500 feet. He just kept circling around. So they sent him home. The 2 of us finally got in and got landings. And one of the guys had instrument lights go out. So they kept him on deck. And that's all there was, just 2 airplanes. And they said it was not enough for 1 airplane to just shoot landings. So I spent the night there in my flight suit. And the next night, they got enough airplanes out there that we shot our night landings and went home, and that's all there was to it. But I was scared to death. I mean, anybody who lands on a carrier and says you're not scared is a damn liar. I mean, that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
I was scared to death all the time.
Especially at night.
At night, well, the squadron I was in was called the Nighthawks, and they flew mostly at night.
Yeah.
So I don't have 500 or 600 landings, and most of them are nighttime landings or takeoffs. And the airplane was very sensitive to crosswinds on a catapult shot. And so you shoot you off the catapult, and if the wind's not within 6 degrees of either side of the bow, you got real problems. So
do you know how many carrier landings you had in your career?
Yeah, a little over 500, 531, I think. About $2,500.
And it never became old hat.
Oh no! It was.
Every one of them was intense.
Every one of them was scary, and you know, what happened is we run 4-hour cycles hunting for submarines, and there would be a standby airplane, so that when you got shot off, if within 15 minutes you didn't get your radar fired up, they'd shoot the standby aircraft off. So there'd be 2 airplanes airborne, because they wouldn't bring in the standby until they brought in the regular recovery. So that meant you had problems scheduling airplanes. But the people who were on standby and didn't go, the next 4 hours, they became the go pilot, and they flew. And it got to be real tiresome when you had 6 pilots, 6 crews, and 4 airplanes and flying around the clock. And that was pretty tiresome. Mm-hmm. And particularly since it was all nighttime. And so we tried to arrange it so that the pilots who had more landings or more seniority flew most of the bad weather or nighttime flights. If it was a clear moon and a still deck, we'd let one of the young guys go out. But if it was raining like hell and stormy and thunder and fire you off and you didn't know whether you're going to come back or not. I brought back an airplane one time because it had this big dome on there, and what was happening, and we found out later on, was it would vibrate a little bit and would shake the instrument panel. Well, you're sitting out there 300 miles from the carrier at 4,000 feet, block his pitch, and all of a sudden the instrument panel starts shaking. You think, what the hell's happened? What the hell's happened? And then he stops. And that wakes you up in a hurry, and so you're flying along, and then it does it again. And you don't know, the instruments look all right after they settle down. And then it does it again, and you said, hell with that. So you come back and you tell the guys, I need to land, and they said, Roger, what's the nature of your emergency? Well, I got this shutter. Well, you circle the ship until it's time to land. So for 3 hours, I circled the games. They wouldn't let me come in. But I was close enough to land, if it was a real problem.
Yeah.
Then another time the rear canopy blew off, and they wouldn't let me land. And another time the gas tank came off, went skittering up the runway like a rocket. Caught on fire and gas all over the place. And another time I missed a wire. They did what they call a bolter. Then when I was on the Lake Champlain, I learned how to land on the straight deck carriers. And on those, you don't take a wave off. If they say land, you land. Because we had an AD that tried to land, and his hook skipped, and there are 12 wires, and his hook skipped. And so he pulled the nose up, and instead of lifting the hook, it meant the hook went down. It got the top of the barrier, which is a huge 3/4 inch, 4-strand, 4-cable arrangement that stops you within 170 feet if you miss all the wires. Mm-hmm. And if you miss all of that, there's Tilly sitting in front of that that you run into, because there are 14 airplanes in front. You don't want to run into those. Right. And this guy caught the barrier with his tail up, and it slammed him down, and the engine fell off, and the tail fell off, and the wings fell off. Two guys climbed out of the cockpit, and that's all it was to it.
So what rank were you when you retired?
I was commander.
Commander?
Probably the oldest commander in the Navy, which was fine, that was great. No responsibilities. Even if they'd promoted me to captain, you had to stay on active duty another 2 years. Yeah. And I don't think I would have done it. Right. I was getting bored. I was getting tired of it. And kids were happy enough in Italy. They loved it. They went horseback riding. Finished high school there, and all spoke the language, and had a great time in Italy. But I was ready to come on back.
So after you came back, where did you come here, or where did you?
Came here to put our daughter in vet school, and found out that she didn't have a room at the dorm, and we weren't about to turn a 17-year-old loose in an apartment and then move and retire in Virginia. Mm-hmm. So we took an apartment, and she stayed with us. And then the other daughter came down from Virginia, finished up at A&M. Mm-hmm. And Claire went down and said, to the library and said, you know, she wanted to look at technical journals. They said, "Are you looking for a job?" And she said, "Well, sort of." And so they hired her. And she's been there ever since.
Been there ever since.
Yeah, so about 6 months later, we found this place and moved in. Been here ever since.
And what did you do?
I went back to 8M, thought I'd go back to school. I almost ate my lunch at summer school because you're 5 days a week, 2 hours a day, and read 3 books and make a report on them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was too much for me.
Uh-huh.
So I found out about some vocational education courses, and I took a course in welding and metalwork and engine repair. And the prof who taught it said I should be teaching it. And so I signed up for graduate school, got a degree, and they started paying me as an instructor.
Uh-huh.
And so I instructed for 15 years and then I retired in ag engineering. My first degree was in journalism.
Yeah.
My second degree was in public relations.
Uh-huh.
My third degree was in ag engineering. I don't know. Anyway.
Your career has been diverse. For a person who didn't necessarily serve in a war zone, you got a lot of stories to tell.
Well, there's a lot of war stories that are going around.
Yeah.
Some of them were true and some of them were not.
Uh-huh.
But you don't know, and your audience doesn't know which are true and which are false.
Right.
So that's what really makes it interesting.
Yeah.
But it was pretty bad. And when I had a family that had 2 small girls, and they had plows that had to plow the snow off the runway in Quonset Point, and I'd take off on a long cruise and leave my wife and 2 daughters there with snow a foot high. And then when we were coming back off a cruise, about a week before we got in, the guy who owned the house told my wife that she'd have to move because he had orders back there. So she just sat down and bawled because she had 2 kids and what was she gonna do, and et cetera. So I got the squadron together and we moved everything to a new house and got her settled, and she was happy enough. But anyway,
Wow.
it was a problem leaving the family. We took Claire out on a Independence cruise out of Boston one week, and I flew one of the airplanes up there and landed it, and then they were going to shoot us off to go home. And I got on a catapult, and they had a couple of aborts for some reason or other. That something was wrong. What they do on a catapult is they hook up a cable to the tail.
Yeah.
And they got a piece of machine metal that's supposed to break at 50,000 pounds. And they got 2 hooks on your main landing gear that they sort of stretch the airplane tight. And supposedly, you run up to full power, and then when the catapult shoots, it breaks this piece back here. Well, it wouldn't break it. And so they stopped everything, and that's really dangerous because you're sitting there all braced and ready to go, and this guy's saying to you, turn off the engine, slow down. And you say, not until you walk out in front. And when he walks out in front, that knows that, you know that thinks it's safe enough that
Right.
nothing's going to happen.
Right.
So you can throttle back.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Claire was up here with the captain looking down. She said, what happened? And the captain said, well, some little minor glitch, no problem. So I did it again. They kind of pushed me back and we reset. Second time it didn't work, so they pushed me back. Claire was beside herself. When they finally shoot me off, Claire says that I dipped below the bow. Well, I never did dip below the bow. Never. There was always enough airspeed at the end that there was no problem.
Yeah.
The jets nowadays, you don't even hold on to the instruments. You hold on to the grips on the side.
Right.
And it automatically compensates. And as soon as you get airborne, you reach down. But when we were flying, you placed your elbow in your belly and held onto the stick. You held the throttle and you grabbed hold of the catapult lever here. And you had it just like that. And then you flicked the switch, and that's it when you were ready to go. And one night I flicked the switch, and the guy kept winding me up saying go. And I thought, well, the light didn't come on. So I turned my head and looked down to flip the switch again. And then he shot me. Well, my head was not back against the rest, and it was at an angle. So when I went off, I felt like I was flying to the left, and I kept trying to correct to the right. And then my instruments kept saying I'm flying level. So what do? You get vertigo. It's really bad, and black as pitch out there.
Yeah.
So anyway, after about 5 minutes, and you just hold the course straight ahead as best you can. Try to gain a little altitude. And then it went away. But it was sort of scary. I didn't used to have gray hair. So that's 22, I had gray.
Well, it's an incredible story. This is going to make for a great show. This is a little different show that I've done before because of it's really talking about, I guess, what's considered to be, even though the Vietnam was going.
Well, it was a peacetime Navy is what it was.
Yeah.
And you know what? You ought to have your ticket punched to go to Vietnam. But I got caught in that cycle that said you can't go to Vietnam because you got to spend 3 years in the Pentagon. And if I spent 3 years there, then the war was about over, and there's no sense in going then. And so it was, you're between a rock and a hard place. Mm-hmm. And so you didn't get your ticket punched. But I got promoted anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference. So
Did you know the president? Nixon, I guess?
I knew what happened is at the Pentagon they had a unveiling of a Medal of Honor, something or other, at the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Right.
And it was one of my jobs to check everybody coming through to make sure that they were on the list of Medal of Honor recipients.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget one of them. And I'd stop and ask them, and they knew what I was doing. But one guy stopped and asked, and he said, "What's the matter with you, young man?" He says, "Don't you see this Medal of Honor pin?" And I said, "Yes, sir, but I'm still supposed to check it." He says, "Well, by God, my name's so-and-so." So I checked him off the list. And he was some famous guy. I didn't recognize him, but he had the Medal of Honor pin on, and so we let him through. But yes, I saw all the presidents. I saw Nixon and Johnson.
Right.
And of course, I didn't see Kennedy, but
right.
It's just one of those things. And of course, in Washington, we felt like we were running a tour guide thing, because everybody came to visit us.
Mm-hmm.
Clara's parents came to visit, my parents, my brother, Clara's sister. They all came to visit. An old classmate came to visit. We put them up. We took them out to see everything. We took them around to the Smithsonian, the whole bit.
Yeah.
And since then, my grandson and I, because I'm in the process of spending the children's inheritance. Mm-hmm. When I die, they're not getting anything but the property. But the grandson and I made 2 trips to Washington, and we've seen all the museums. We made 2 trips to London. We've seen everything in London. They've now built the World War II Memorial in Washington.
Right.
And out of Dulles Field, Dulles Airport, they have a huge hangar with all the airplanes of World War II and earlier. And we haven't seen that yet. So I keep saying, well, we're going to go next summer. And he keeps saying, well, I've got this truck and I've got a girlfriend and I just can't go off and leave her. And so and my wife won't let me go by myself because she's afraid something will happen to my heart or my hip or something. So I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I keep saying to her, well, come June 1st, I'm leaving.
Did you ever fly any of those World War II planes?
Well,
Did you ever fly a Hellcat? Like driving?
That's another interesting thing. One of the squadrons at San Diego, where I learned how to fly jets, had F-6Fs that were drones. And what they do is they put you on the runway, and they had what they call a fox operator. And the fox operator sat there behind the airplane, and he could control the braking, differential braking, and the throttle. And just like flying model airplanes. He'd get it airborne. And then another guy would come in, and they had an identical set of controls up here. And he'd take over from the fox operator and fly this airplane out and let a ship shoot it down. Of course, we stayed 3 or 4 miles away. So one day they asked me if I wanted to fly one of the F-6s, and I said, sure. Well, they wanted me to fly it while this fox operator was learning how to take their planes off, and so that I could mash the button and take over if there were problems, you know. We went down the runway like this and that, and then the guy took over in the air, and he decided to have a little fun with it, so he got me up to 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and then he started me down into the water. I turned the damn thing off in a hurry. And I couldn't land it, but I could fly it.
So this was in an F6F. So
Yeah, so it was a Hellcat, yeah.
So you were flying it by yourself.
By myself.
And yeah, because it was a one-seater.
And somebody else was controlling it.
Was controlling it.
Yeah, from...
You mean you didn't do anything? You just...
I just sat there, and if it looked like it was going off course, well, I had a button that I could mash it, take over and start flying it. But it just sat there and flew.
But eventually you took it over.
Eventually the guy took it over probably and landed it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it was a lousy landing too.
Right.
Also. So I said to hell, I didn't want to fly the F6 anymore. Just, you guys go ahead and do whatever you want to. I don't want anything to do with it.
Unless you could fly it yourself.
Yeah, they thought it was a great joke, you know. I was a young lieutenant, thought I was hot stuff, I could fly anything. So they put me in this airplane and decided to fly it themselves.
Well, I asked about that because my mother's first husband, who wasn't my father, but she remarried later. My mother's first husband flew Hellcat.
Yeah. That's quite an airplane.
And well, they started off with F4Fs, and then they upgraded them to during the war. Actually, they upgraded them to find a plane that could outmaneuver the Zeros.
Well, the airplane that was really great though was the F8.
Right.
Because that thing held the record for climbing to 10,000 feet for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And then when I flew the AD.
But didn't the Hellcat have more kills?
Yes. Yeah. Because it was there, you know, it was developed during the fighting.
During the fight,
the F8 came later.
That's right. Yeah. Right.
But when I started flying the jets, I couldn't believe how simple it was, you know. You didn't have to bother about mixture control or setting the props or moving the throttle back. You just picked up the gear and built the flaps and away you went.
Yeah.
And 100%, I mean, you could go to 41,000 feet without even thinking about it. And no one told me that. In fact, I was afraid to throttle back too much, afraid the fire would go out. You know, you throttle back a little bit, and 98% and 97%, and it's all logarithmic. You know, if 98% is twice as much as 96%, and 96% is twice as much as so on and so forth. So after I learned how to fly it, it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'd take one of those things up to 40,000 feet, flip it over on its back, hit straight down it, and just about break the sound barrier. Just about. No. And then I had to pull up, you know, at about 8 or 10,000 feet. Because I wasn't really a daredevil in those days. I wasn't a natural flyer. But I didn't mind seeing, you know, ringing an airplane out and see what it would do.
Mm-hmm. So when was the last time you flew?
Oh, geez. When I got reading glasses, I guess, in about I went to Naples in 70. So it was about 1970 or so. They didn't want to put me in jets because they were afraid if I ejected, I'd break my neck.
So you didn't want to do any pleasure flying after you retired?
No, those little airplanes are deadly. You know that. You get killed if you're not careful with those.
Yeah.
But I like flying the F9, and I like flying the A4. That was a lot of fun, and the F4 was so fast. It was just, I mean, you think about climbing and you're at 10,000 feet, and with 2 engines and all that power, it's like strapping on a locomotive when you've been driving a Volkswagen. Really, just all the power in the world, just really get up and go. But I've flown, I don't know, maybe 15 different airplanes.
Right.
Right.
Have you got any photographs or anything like that? Any pictures?
Probably.
Of anything from?
Probably.
Anything you can show me?
Probably.
I don't need very much. Maybe a picture of yourself or anything, or a picture.
Okay.
Anything.
I'd have to look them up. I've got them all on the computer, but I'll find them.
Well, no, that's good. Well, no, if they're on the computer, that saves me a step. If you could.
I could email them to you.
Yeah, that's what I want you to do.
Yeah.
Email me some pictures.
Yeah.
I'll give you my email address, and that even makes it easier.
Just write down your email on the back of that. There's a pencil there.
Matter of fact, wait, no, I don't have that. Just right on the back of it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
And I promise I'll send you.
Send it to me so that I can send it to me, sometime Like by tomorrow afternoon?
No, I'll get it out today. Now, let's see, I've got a picture of me when I first flown the SNJ when I soloed. It was on my birthday. Let's see, I've got a picture of me flying the F9F. I think I got a picture of me flying the B-26 over Mount Fuji.
Uh-huh.
I think I got a picture of me. Oh, there's a big picture of me in there flying one of the 8 Sky Raiders. And I got pictures of me on the tanker. The 6th Fleet commander in 1952 said that no officer can leave the ship without wearing a hat because naval personnel do not salute without a hat on.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody had to have a hat. And since I was new, I didn't have a hat. So a guy loaned me a hat so that I could go ashore and buy a hat. And we would take the hats and we would wear them to get off the ship and get in the boat. Put them in a little ditty bag in the boat. When we came back, we'd get on the boat, put on our hats, come back and salute. It was ridiculous. I think he was the same guy that required us to change our skivvy shirts. He didn't like skivvy shirts showing up here, so he made everybody buy a V-neck skivvy shirt so it wouldn't show.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do with all those millions of regular skivvy shirts that all the sailors have?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you had to get rid of them, and you had to go and buy a V-neck skivvy shirt that wouldn't show. And that lasted 3 years also. And then it went back to the regular. But I did a study at the War College about black officers in the Navy, and we went down to Washington and visited with Admiral Zumwalt.
Mm-hmm.
And I was impressed with his house because his house had all white rugs throughout. I mean, it was a huge house. They were all white. And I was afraid to walk on them. I was afraid to carry a drink, afraid I'd spilled something.
Uh-huh.
But there were 5 guys there that did nothing but clean up the place after we left, so it didn't make any difference. But that was really something. Zumwalt.
Wow.
We got a nice letter from him later on saying thank you for visiting and appreciated all your work and all that good stuff. But that and a quarter will get you.
Well, yeah, send me a dozen or so pictures or whatever your favorite.
I'll send you whatever I got.
Yeah. Send
I've got some pictures of me as a midshipman when I was 18 years old.
Good, I want that too. Yeah, young and through that, and then somewhere in the middle of the show or so, we'll stop and we'll just do a little slideshow of the pictures and let you comment on each one, and then we'll do that. We're going to do the show Wednesday. We start taping about 1:30 if you want to get there about 1:15.
I'll be there.
You know where KAMU is?
Got all those big antennas.
Yeah, it's a 1-story building there on Houston Street.
I took them some money there one time when they were running a radio thing for subscribe.
Right.
Send your money.
Yeah.
So I got up all my change, I made a sack full, and took it into them.
Yeah. You can park in the back. If you're going down Houston Street, the building will be on your left. You can just take a left right after the building and park. There's a parking lot right behind the building.
Okay.
You can park there, and you can come in the back door. There's a ramp there in the back door. You can come in there. And we'll start taping around 1:30, and we just tape straight through. There's no commercials. There's no anything. We just sit like you and I are sitting now.
Even if I pick my nose, you take a picture.
You take a picture of that. And I'll just sort of lead the conversation, but it'll mostly be you pretty much just talking just like
whatever you want.
Now, and
I'll do whatever you say.
And I'll get you tapes and CDs, DVDs of it and all that since you don't get it out here.
We'll take care of it.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Claire was